Sparta is remembered as disciplined, unified, and feared. Yet the authority that made it formidable depended on a contradiction that never resolved. The more completely Sparta organized itself around fear, the less capable it became of exercising power beyond fear's reach. Strength hardened into rigidity. Control narrowed into suspicion. What looked like stability concealed a pressure that could not be released without unraveling the very order that produced it. Sparta's authority was not abstract. It was built into law, ritual, and daily life. Two kings ruled simultaneously, their powers balanced by the ephors, magistrates elected annually with the authority to indict kings themselves. The Gerousia, a council of elders, shaped policy and judgment. This was not chaos, but a carefully layered structure designed to prevent any single figure from becoming dominant. Yet beneath this balance lay a more decisive institution, the perpetual mobilization of fear. The Helots, the Bai, an enslaved population bound to the land, vastly outnumbered Spartan citizens. Their labor sustained the state, their existence threatened it. Every political decision, military formation, and social rule took shape against the possibility of revolt. From childhood, Spartan citizens were trained not simply to fight, but to obey. The Agagi stripped individuality in favor of endurance and conformity. Speech was compressed, emotion was restrained. Loyalty was measured by silence as much as action. Authority did not persuade, it disciplined. The state did not need to justify itself to its citizens. It conditioned them to accept that justification was unnecessary. Order was its own argument. This fear-based authority projected outward as confidence. Other Greek city-states saw Spartan hoplites as immovable, their formations disciplined beyond comparison. Sparta's reputation carried weight even when its armies did not move. During the early phases of the Peloponnesian War, this authority shaped Greek politics as much as force did. Allies deferred. Rivals hesitated. Sparta appeared stable precisely because it did not change. But the same mechanisms that preserved internal control narrowed external judgment. Spartan power depended on preventing disruption, not managing it. Its institutions were designed to freeze social relations in place. Citizenship was restricted. Wealth accumulation was discouraged. Travel was limited. New ideas were suspect by default. This insulation protected Sparta from internal fracture, but it also deprived its leaders of adaptive tools. Authority became less a means of decision-making and more a mechanism of denial. Problems were not solved, they were held at bay. Fear, once institutionalized, began to distort perception. The Helots were not merely a labor force. They were a constant reminder that Spartan authority rested on coercion rather than consent. Annual declarations of war against them made violence lawful at any time. The Cryptia, a secretive institution tasked with terrorizing the Helot population, blurred the boundary between security and paranoia. Authority here did not calm anxiety. It formalized it. The state acted as if threat were permanent, and in doing so ensured that it always would be. This posture shaped Sparta's conduct beyond its borders. Leadership within the Greek world required negotiation, compromise, and trust. Sparta's authority could command obedience, but it struggled to sustain legitimacy among equals. Its allies were treated less as partners than as extensions of its security perimeter. Decisions were slow, cautious, and often reactive. Fear of internal destabilization limited the willingness to project power decisively. Each campaign risked leaving home exposed. Each victory raised the question of what change might follow. The Peloponnesian War revealed this tension without resolving it. Sparta eventually defeated Athens, but the victory carried costs that its institutions were not designed to absorb. Commanding an empire required administration, flexibility, and tolerance for difference. Spartan leaders, accustomed to enforcing uniformity, found themselves managing populations that did not share their discipline or fear. Authority expanded faster than legitimacy could follow. In attempting to rule, Sparta imported practices it had long resisted. Coinage circulated, foreign influence increased, naval power demanded new forms of expertise. Each adjustment chipped away at the closed system that had preserved internal order. Fear could enforce obedience within a bounded society, but it could not easily sustain authority across a diverse one. The very rigidity that once stabilized Sparta now amplified every deviation as a threat. Internally, the citizen body shrank. Military losses were difficult to replace within a system that restricted citizenship so tightly. Authority responded not by reforming inclusion, but by doubling down on tradition. Decline was met with preservation rather than adaptation. Fear of change outweighed fear of collapse. In this way, power began to act against its own survival. The contradiction sharpened. To maintain dominance, Sparta needed flexibility. To preserve internal control, it rejected it. Authority could either loosen its grip and risk transformation, or tighten it and accept erosion. Each decision reinforced the limits of the system. Power no longer distorted judgment occasionally, it defined it. Over time, Greek states that had once deferred to Spartan authority began to test its boundaries. The aura of inevitability faded. Rivals adapted faster. Coalitions formed not out of loyalty, but calculation. Sparta's fear-based power had been effective when the primary task was containment. It faltered when the task became leadership. What eroded was not simply military strength, but credibility. Authority rooted in fear struggled to justify itself once fear alone was insufficient. The institutions that had balanced power internally now constrained it externally. Decision-making slowed. Initiative narrowed. The state that had once shaped the behavior of others found itself reacting to forces it could neither intimidate nor absorb. At its core, Sparta's power rested on the belief that order must be protected from uncertainty at all costs. Yet uncertainty did not disappear. It accumulated at the edges, in demographic decline, in reluctant allies, in altered economic realities. Authority responded by insisting on continuity, mistaking endurance for control. The more it enforced sameness, the less room it left for survival. The fear that had disciplined citizens also disciplined imagination. Leaders trained to preserve order found it difficult to envision futures that did not resemble the past. Authority became an inheritance rather than a practice. Legitimacy was assumed, not renewed. In this way, power ceased to listen. Sparta did not collapse suddenly. It thinned. Its influence receded unevenly, not through a single defeat, but through a series of constrained choices. Authority remained visible even as its effectiveness diminished. Fear still operated, but it no longer produced coherence. It produced inertia. The unresolved question lingers not in Sparta's failure, but in its design. When authority is built to prevent internal challenge above all else, what capacity remains to confront a world that does not share its fears? And how long can power survive when its primary achievement is the suppression of alternatives rather than their negotiation? Sparta's legacy is not simply that fear can enforce order. It is that authority shaped around fear may preserve itself long after it has undermined the conditions that once made it viable. The tension does not resolve. It persists as a pattern, waiting for other states to mistake control for stability and discipline for strength. For more reflections on history, power, and human nature, subscribe to Timeless Questions.